Number of COVID-19 cases in Hong Kong reaches 1,000.
Mathematically, when we look at the calculations, there is actually 3 times more virus production in SARS-CoV-2.
Local researchers explain why the coronavirus is so virulent. And globally, number of dead from COVID-19 tops 100,000. Good evening, everyone. Some mixed news on the COVID-19 case count. While the total number of cases has reached the 1,000 mark, just 11 new infections were recorded today. Kana Chu has more.
The latest diagnosed cases involve 5 males and 6 females aged 19 to 59. Among them, 10 had a travel history, including 2 students and a domestic helper who went abroad with the family of her employer.
The number is a bit on the lower side, but I hope this is a persistent trend, not a temporary trend. Because of the long incubation period, the situation now is reflecting around 1 or 2 weeks before. So I'm not sure about the coming trend.
The only case which had no travel history is a 29-year-old woman who visited a bar. Her boyfriend had earlier tested positive as well. Starting today, authorities will also allow eligible quarantine center occupants to complete the last 4 days of their compulsory 2-week isolation at home. The arrangement has seen 37 people head back to their homes so far.
The 10+4 arrangement is for the close contacts, so we put them under medical surveillance for 28 days in total, including the 14 days in quarantine either in the camp or at home. So, of course, if they don't tell us they are sick, it's difficult to monitor them.
Noting that people appear to have let their guard down during the Easter holiday, she reminded the public to practice social distancing and avoid going outdoors as much as possible. So far, more than 330 people have recovered and have been discharged from hospital. However, 650 coronavirus patients are still being treated across 14 public hospitals. This includes 14 people who are in critical condition. The negative pressure bed count is now at 1,130 with a 65% utilization rate. For the 579 negative pressure wards, the utilization rate is 72%. Kana Chu, TVB News.
Some groundbreaking research from local scientists is showing how disruptive the virus could be. New studies reveal the coronavirus produces more than 3 times the number of infectious particles than the 2003 SARS virus in human lung tissues. Pinky Wong with that story.
Researchers from the University of Hong Kong and Queen Mary Hospital conducted research on the first ex vivo human lung tissue culture model to study the pathogenesis and testing treatments for COVID-19. In the study, 6 patient donors saw their lung tissues inoculated with SARS-CoV, which is a 2003 SARS virus, and SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19.
The SARS-CoV-2 produced much more virus particles during this 48 hours time interval than that of the SARS coronavirus. And it is also consistent between different donors. By looking at the surface area, there's more red than blue, right? So, and mathematically, when we look at the calculations, there is actually 3 times more virus production in SARS-CoV-2 infected lung tissues comparing to SARS-CoV infected lung tissues.
The experts further explained why this battle is a harder one to fight.
The SARS-CoV-2 does not at all elicit any sort of strong immune response, but it can replicate to very high levels inside the human lung tissue. So that also explains why we are always talking about asymptomatic patients walking around in the community and then spreading the disease without himself or herself knowing. It is now apparent that the use of interferons, especially in our clinical trial using interferon beta, which is one of the 2 most potent interferons against many virus infections, including SARS coronavirus 2. In a cocktail therapy, we are giving 3 drugs, 2 or 3 drugs. And one of them is this interferon beta, which is a licensed drug for other purposes initially. So by doing this, we are supplementing the human body with the initially needed interferon that is not elicited. So we are not only giving a drug that directly acts on the virus itself, but we are also giving a supplementary interferon so that we can win both ways.
When asked about what Hong Kong should do beyond the current measures,
by September, are we going to reopen the schools? The children and university has not been functioning for a long time. Now, I think the answer probably is that we try to increase our testing capacity so that everybody that go back has to be tested. All right, make sure that you're really not carrying the virus. You continue to wear the mask. You continue to have a very good hand hygiene.
Penky Wong, TVB News.
Over in Hubei province, 320 COVID-19 patients remain hospitalized, but less than 100 of them are serious. With the situation improving in Wuhan, the 2 emergency field hospitals in the city are set to close on Wednesday. Currently, around 15 patients remain in Leishanshan Hospital, while Huoshanshan Hospital has around 40 with the disease. They will be transferred to other hospitals before the field hospitals are closed. Still on the mainland, authorities have reported a spike in the new COVID-19 cases as the country tries to stem a second wave of infections. This comes as restrictions on cities and travel are lifted. The National Health Commission said 46 new cases were reported on Friday, up from 42 new cases a day earlier. The latest cases include 42 involving overseas travelers. Tough clampdowns imposed since January helped rein in infections at the height of the pandemic in China. A number of new imported cases have been from people entering from Russia, which has seen a surge of cases. The global death toll from COVID-19 has risen past the 100,000 mark. While some industries are expected to reopen for business in Europe, the World Health Organization is warning against lifting restrictions too soon. Leslie Tang has more.
The worldwide COVID-19 death toll has topped the grim mark of 100,000. But it's not all bad news for the most virus-ravaged countries in Europe. Spain reported over 500 deaths in the past 24 hours, its smallest overnight increase in almost 3 weeks. Staff at this elderly care home in Madrid are encouraging people to keep staying at home to stop the virus from spreading to their facility. But there are slight jitters as the country gave the green light for factories and construction sites to start up again come Monday. Over in Italy, Europe's virus epicenter, there have been fewer hospital admissions. The trend started about a week ago. Italy's prime minister announced the nationwide lockdown will still be extended until May 3rd. But from April 14th, stationery shops, bookstores, and shops for babies can reopen. But the World Health Organization warned against jumping the gun.
I know that some countries are already planning the transition out of stay-at-home restrictions. WHO wants to see restrictions lifted as much as anyone. At the same time, lifting restrictions too quickly could lead to a deadly resurgence. The way down can be as dangerous as the way up if not managed properly.
This comes as the shuttered UK reported a record one-day rise in deaths.
Of those who've contracted the virus, 8,958 have sadly died, an increase of 980 since yesterday.
In some encouraging news, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson appears to be on the mend in hospital. His office said he is able to take short walks between periods of rest. Johnson is the first major world leader to be infected with COVID-19. Leslie Tang, TVB News.
U.S. coronavirus cases have topped 500,000, with the number of COVID-19 related deaths nearing the 19,000 mark. But in the midst of an important holiday weekend, there are signs that Americans are getting the message to stay home to help curb new infections. As testing becomes more available, confirmed U.S. cases of COVID-19 are rising by as much as 35,000 a day. Health officials predict the fatalities could peak in the next few days and then decline. But during the Easter weekend holiday, experts warn now is not the time to back off restrictions.
When we decide at a proper time when we're going to be relaxing some of the restrictions, there's no doubt you're going to see cases. I would be so surprised if we did not see cases.
As the pandemic slams the U.S. economy, some forecasts project job losses of up to 20 million in April. The Trump administration's top economic officials are hopeful the U.S. economy could start to reopen for normal business in May. The president pointed to a decrease in hospital admissions in some places as a sign that his administration's strategy is working.
It's incredible. I think with no exceptions, it's looking like it's lower.
Models are now forecasting U.S. death rates far lower than originally estimated. But experts warn that reopening the country too soon could cause a devastating new spike in infections. Trump, meanwhile, also teased an announcement amid his ongoing spat with the World Health Organization.
As you know, we give them approximately $500 million a year, and we're going to be talking about that subject next week. We'll have a lot to say about it.
In hard-hit lockdown New York City, Good Friday Mass was live-streamed in front of empty pews. An infectious disease specialist and former New Yorker described the situation as essentially two Chinas in New York State.
You have 1/70th of the population, but twice as many cases and deaths as all of China so far as of today. So it really is an intense transmission.
Cyrus Shapar admitted that while experts are greatly expanding their knowledge of COVID-19, critical gaps remain in how best to combat its spread. Still ahead in tonight's news. Government promises people will be able to monitor how employers use wage handouts. Police report a surge in face mask scams. And additional charges slapped on disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein. Welcome back to TVB News. Authorities are planning to make public all companies that have been approved for the wage subsidy scheme. As Jackie Lynn reports, the government says the aim is to prevent the misuse of the handouts.
In a bid to stem the hemorrhaging of jobs amid the reeling economy, the government's latest bailout fund has a clear goal. Workers should be kept on the payroll. With that in mind, the $80 billion scheme will subsidize employers half the salary they pay their staff, with a cap at $9,000 per person. But as the cash is funneled to staff through employers, the government is warning businesses not to pocket the wage subsidies, reiterating that the money is for the workers.
If they use the subsidy for other purposes, it will be totally unacceptable. And it will claw back the money.
Not only will employers be fined for misusing the fund, but criminal charges could also ensue, Jerang says. To further ensure compliance, the government plans to make public the amount of subsidies given to each company which has successfully applied for the scheme.
To ensure absolute transparency, particularly to the employees concerned, so they know whether the employers have applied for the scheme and whether they are successful indeed.
Labor Chief Lau Chi-kwang, on the other hand, admits it's hard to prevent businesses from exploiting the loopholes. Dismissing suggestions to vet the employees' wages, he says it could cause a delay in the rollout. The government says the scheme will be open for applications in mid-May at the earliest, and the first round of subsidies will be doled out in June, benefiting a total of 1.5 million workers. Jackie Lynn, TVB News.
Meanwhile, the transport chief says he's looking at ways to subsidize the wages of minibus drivers affected by the downturn from the pandemic. Haley Joe with more on that.
two minibus routes between Whampoa and Kowloon Tong were taken over by Kelly's Limited today after the original operator couldn't afford to run them anymore after 40 years. There are routes that have been axed along with drivers. This is a story about a government acting too slow in helping businesses save jobs amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Minibus operators and drivers have been pleading for help. With schools suspended for months and many workers working from home, passenger numbers have plunged since early this year. The government this week announced an $80 billion wage subsidy scheme, but recipients must have a pension scheme account.
There are drivers who are of age 65 or above because they don't have the MPF account, and therefore I understand from the Secretary for Labor and Welfare that they will look into alternatives as to how to offer support to these green minibus drivers who are of age 65 or above.
Meanwhile, the city's railway operator promised to cut its fares by 20% for 6 months from July. And the MTR Corporation's CEO and executive directors say they will donate 20% of their salaries for 6 months to help those in need amid the epidemic. The transport chief says minibus operators can't afford to do the same. But instead, he urges people to take advantage of the enhanced rebate scheme.
Take note of the public transport fare subsidy scheme. We have, in fact, lowered the threshold from 400 Hong Kong dollar to 200 Hong Kong dollar so as to enable more people to benefit. And the amount of subsidy on average would be increased from roughly about $75 to $99.9.
Haley Zhou, TVB News.
More than 1,600 reports of face mask scams have been filed during the first quarter of this year, worth close to $50 million. Caleb Leung has details.
With no end in sight to the COVID-19 pandemic, it has created a perfect opportunity for fraudsters to take advantage of those in need. In just the first quarter of this year, police say more than 3,000 people fell victim to face mask scams. One of those scammed is a private medical clinic, which posted an advertisement online in February to procure masks. Scammers who posed as a European supplier asked the clinic to transfer around $20 million to 14 overseas bank accounts. The police later managed to recover around $15 million. The total amount defrauded in the first quarter of the year is around $48 million. More than 80% of the cases involved scam artists making sales pitches online, while the rest were involved in making fake websites. The scammers usually ask the victims to pay in advance and refuse to do face-to-face transactions. So far, the police have arrested 39 people aged between 14 and 58 in connection with more than 120 cases. Before placing an order, shoppers are advised to research the credibility of an online store and shop at stores with a good reputation. The police also warned the public of some telephone con artists exploiting the epidemic. The scammers impersonated Department of Health workers, telling victims that their bank accounts had been used in online face mask scams. The victims were then asked to disclose their bank account details, allowing the scammers to steal their money. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Overseas again, Los Angeles prosecutors have charged imprisoned former film producer Harvey Weinstein with an additional count of felony sexual battery by restraint. It's alleged the former movie mogul sexually assaulted a woman in a Beverly Hills hotel in 2010. She was initially interviewed by detectives as a corroborating witness, but recently provided details showing her alleged assault occurred within the 10-year statute of limitations. The 68-year-old Weinstein is already charged in Los Angeles with sexually assaulting 2 women in separate incidents in 2013. He was convicted in February of rape and sexual assault in New York and is serving a 23-year prison sentence. He recently overcame a bout with coronavirus. And that is our time for the news. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.